विजय जॉली जी, पूज्य आचार्य लोकेश मुनि जी, office bearers of the Delhi Study Circle on the stage, and friends. I am very thankful for this occasion. Although this is my 6th term in Parliament, it should have been an ordinary event, but the Congress party has made it into an extraordinary. They seem to be scared that I might come out with more rabbits out of the hat. We today are in a stage which is popularly called in mathematics as a stage of the cusp, which is that we are either, if we don't extract and utilize our potential, we will be left behind. But if we act according to our potential, we will become the leading economic country of the world. We were once upon a time the leading economic country in the world. We are also the leading spiritual country in the world, leading in mathematics, science. And people from all over the world used to come to India. I spent many years in a suburb of the city of Boston in USA, called Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Harvard University is located. And there's a big pond there where people go on the morning walk. And there's a signboard there standing which says, "Here stood Tudor Ice Company," which used to export ice to India in 1636. Now, I was surprised why anybody would export ice and how it was done. So I went to Google and wrote on it Tudor Ice Company, and a book that was published about it was a thing. Then from Amazon I got the copy of the book. What does it say? That from the state of Massachusetts, United States, ships used to go from a port town called Salem and reach India and South India in Kanchipuram port. And there, of course, there was a great Chola civilization at that time in South India. And they used to buy spices, and they used to buy cloth and so many other things which are not available in the United States. So one day the king called them and asked them, "You've been coming regularly every year. Is there anything I can do for you?" So they said, "Well, there's one thing you can do for me, for us, that is buy something from the United States. Because we come with an empty ship and we load all that we buy here and go back. So we'd like to bring something from the United States so that the ship doesn't have to come empty." So the king said, "Well, in India we produce everything. What is it that you produce that I can buy? I mean, I can get everything in India." So they insisted. So then he said, "See, I have never seen ice in my life. Because in Tamil Nadu it's so hot, how can there be ice? But I know there is ice in Himalayas, but it's so far away. So, but I hear in your country ice falls from the sky. There is, snowfall we thought was ice. So if you bring ice, I will buy." So in that big lake in winter which used to freeze, they used to cut it up, put sawdust on it, and take it all the way to India. And the first export from the United States was ice to India. That was the situation where all the United States could sell to us was ice, and they bought so many goods from our country. Over the years, our economy declined, and largely due to foreign invasions and the exploitative system of zamindari set up by the British after the 1857 War of Independence. And India was very poor in 1947, and agriculture particularly was bled to the bone by the zamindari system. At that time we made the biggest error of all, disregarding the advice of Mahatma Gandhi, disregarding the advice of Sardar Patel. Jawaharlal Nehru imposed the Soviet economic model on India, which was based on the principle that you extract money from agriculture and finance industrialization. There was nothing to extract from agriculture, and therefore that model failed. We had agriculture, we had food famine in the mid-60s, and we had a foreign exchange crisis. Unfortunately, we dismantled it when I became minister, Mr. Chandrasekhar became Prime Minister. During that period of 40 years from 1950 to 1990, we grew only at 3.5% per year. And the communists, instead of owning up that they had made a mistake or that their model was a failure, used to call it the Hindu rate of growth. I mean, it was a communist rate of growth, but they put it on the Hindus. It's a popular sport to put everything wrong with India on the Hindus. And but the model was changed. We brought economic reforms, and now 7% growth rate is nothing. We are now beginning to target for 10%, 12%. If we can grow 10 years at 10% per year, then we can become a developed country in a very short time. Already, by proper calculation, proper use of prices, which is called purchasing power parity, India is the third largest GDP in the world, second largest in population. The second largest GDP country is China, and the first largest, of course, United States. And they are also the three most populous countries in the world. China being the most populous, ours second, and the United States third. And in fact, these three countries, the triangle of these countries, will be deciding the globalization that is going to come in the next 50 years. Well, fortunately, we are no more fascinated by the Soviet model. The communists used to do propaganda that the Soviet model is so wonderful that there is no inflation in Soviet Union, there is no unemployment in Soviet Union, and there is no poverty in Soviet Union. Now the only truth is that there is no Soviet Union also. It's broken up into 16 countries, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and so on, and all that is left is the rump, Russia. So, for us to grow internationally, we have to have not only democracy, but we also must have a market economy. And a market economy is not laissez-faire or a capitalist model. There is regulation, and that regulation is of the government, but it is minimal. It's more like a government, almost like an umpire, and occasionally like an ambulance. And in that, the consumers and the producers have to be empowered through the market to exchange the demand for their supply. That is the model that we have to move. We moved very rapidly in the early 90s, but then it's got stopped, and it has been very haphazard. I think time has come for us to think in terms of major economic reforms as soon as we put the house in order, which we have been trying to do the last 2 years. Now, I would say there are two ways for India to participate in the global economy. One way is the way the Chinese have, and the one way that I would prefer India to globalize. What did the Chinese do? They knew that they had skilled labor, very cheap labor. So they took semi-processed goods from East Asia and added value to it processed it, and sold it to Europe and America. Previously, the East Asian countries like Taiwan and South Korea and all these East Asian countries, Japan, they used to directly export to the United States and Europe. But their labor became expensive. So because their labor became expensive, they were looking for a labor cheap country, and China was ready. So China then began importing semi-processed goods, and then added value to it, made it complete, and then sold it at a much higher price abroad. So if you look at the trade data of China, you'll find they have a deficit with East Asia and a huge surplus with Europe and America. And that's how China's economic growth was propelled. Now that's a very dangerous approach in my opinion, and the Chinese are beginning to realize that. Because it's, first of all, it does give you instant prosperity, but then your labor becomes expensive also. You can't keep down labor when there's prosperity all around. And therefore these East Asian countries could well tomorrow look for another country. Second, the indigenous industry of your country cannot develop if you go on depending on semi-processed goods from another country. So for instance, this Lenovo computer, it's written made in China, but it's not really made in China. It's made in Taiwan. And it comes in a semi-processed stage, it's then fully processed, and then they put a stamp on it and say made in China. Most of the Chinese industry is either foreign investment aided or foreign owned. Domestic strength of the Chinese economy is weak, and tomorrow, if the East Asians decide to find a cheaper source for labor, then I'm afraid the Chinese are going to be in great difficulty. India can be that, because India's labor is also skilled, and skilled labor is cheaper than China. But nobody wants to come to India because you've got lousy infrastructure. And therefore, Mr. Nitin Gadkari is working full time. I think by the time we have finished 5 years, we'll have world-class infrastructure thanks to his dynamism and his... and then they can come. But even then, I would not like our economy to be built in that way. We should look at our strengths and exploit that. One of our biggest strengths is agriculture. You'll be surprised to know that even today, our agricultural products, that is crops, are the cheapest in the world. Rice would be probably 1/3 the price internationally. Wheat will be 1/2. Vegetables, fruits, much cheaper internationally. Milk is perhaps 1/6 the price in Europe. Why don't we export all this? Because there's no infrastructure. If you want to export agricultural products, then you will have to have packaging, you'll have to have, ensure that it is hygienically done. Then you must have local airports which will take these products after packaging. You need a very good packaging industry. Take it to the ships, the freight, or by plane, and be able to go abroad. Now it's possible to do business because of internet. Agriculture we can do, but there's a catch. Both the Americans and the Europeans have heavy trade restrictions on that, and we have to fight for it. The WTO was supposed to do this in this Doha rounds, but it hasn't done so because we haven't pushed hard enough. We must ensure that if the Western countries want our barriers to be reduced or removed in industrial areas, in services areas, then they must remove it in the agricultural areas. There is this great non-level playing field between the Western countries and India. Walmart has been trying very hard to come to India. But the problem is that if Walmart comes, it will not be a level playing field. Why? Because Walmart gets capital in their own country at 2% interest rate. And then they come to India and dip into our labor force. And in India, the competitive trader, he gets, thanks to Raghuram Rajan, 12% interest rate. And in the informal market, 25% interest rate. How can you compete? Yes, if the Americans were to agree that Indian companies can go to the United States with Indian labor and participate in the tenders for house construction, road construction and so on, then there's no harm in Walmart coming to India. But the Americans don't allow that. They say this is immigration problem. They won't allow our cheap labor to go to America, but they want the cheap capital to come to India. So these kinds of things we have to fight. And you have to therefore, it's easy to talk about globalization, but let's be very clear that we want globalization in the terms of division of labor. Division of labor means those those countries with capital cheapness should produce machinery which we can buy, and we can do small and medium industry products because our labor is so cheap. Or we, in the high-tech areas, we can outsource. These are the things we need to do. Unfortunately, in the last 15-20 years, we have literally not thought of our natural advantages in economics, and we have literally lost a lot of advantages. The example is agriculture. Today, agriculture is not only cheap, but the yield per acre in agriculture is one of the lowest in the world. We produce in 1 acre of land 1/6 that of Japan. Our cows produce 200 liters a year only, average. One Israeli cow produces 11,000 liters per year. Imagine if our 150 million cows produced the Israeli average of 11,000 meters, then I'll have to come to this meeting swimming in milk. That much milk there will be in the country. This abundance is further compounded by the fact that India can do agriculture 12 months of the year. America, 5 months of the year, snowfall, no agriculture. Europe the same, most of China the same. But this country, God has gifted, you can do 12 months of the year, which means you can grow 3 crops a year. But we are only growing, only in 25% of our land we are growing more than 1 crop. Because so much land, we are the largest irrigated area under cultivation. 120 million hectares. Even China doesn't have that much. Even though China is a much bigger country. And on top of that, we have a labor force which is young. 50% of our population is below the age of 20. What is going to transform India? It's not more capital, more labor. Every day we see this craze for foreign direct investment and so on. No harm if foreign direct investment comes. But the real thing that we need in our country, and that's the lesson of economics, is innovation. You might have seen our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, constantly talking about innovation. How to overcome the obstacles that we have to growth by new innovations. For example, we don't have high quality coal very much, so we are importing it. But we have 60% of the world's thorium. If thorium can be converted into a fuel for a reactor, India will produce so much electricity that all the neighboring countries of India will get they will get it. Same thing, water. South India, we are fighting on Kaveri every day. But if you desalinate sea water, you will have never any shortage of water. Everything that today we have, for example, oil, fortunately oil prices have come down, but tomorrow if like the Japanese have done with Toyota in one or two models, if we can convert to hydrogen fuel cells, which is powered by electricity, by plugging in the night and getting in battery recharged, these hydrogen fuel cells are the cleanest you can produce, the cleanest vehicles you can produce. There will be no pollution and there will be no need for water. No need for oil. Poor Arab countries will suffer even more if that happens. We find an alternative. America will not find that alternative because America has got all the shale oil, huge surplus. So the oil companies say no innovation. Yeah. And they were powerful enough to prevent the United States government from doing it. So if one were to say what is the truth about India, it's this enormous potential and this historical legacy that we were the most developed country of the world at once upon a time. And wherever we got an opportunity of doing so well, the average income of an Indian population, that is people from India, in the United States is more than the average income of the white Americans, more than the average income of the Japanese, South Koreans and so on. Because our professionals go there and they take like duck to water and they are most sought after. If I'm not wrong, Google and Microsoft, everything has now got an Indian head. So therefore, this potential is how to exploit it. When 1990, when we had this huge economic crunch, we were about to default when Chandrasekhar government came. At that time, when I suggested that this socialism will not produce results and we must start disbanding, everybody thought I was nuts. But the successor government, on which I also held a cabinet rank position as head of the GATT Commission in Narasimha Rao's government, to the credit of Narasimha Rao, he had the nerve and the guts to push it through. And in no time, from 3.5% per year, we started growing at 8% within the period of 5 years. But Congress Party never honored Narasimha Rao. In fact, Congress Party, I think, has not honored any of the great people. In 1991, Chandrasekhar asked me, I also held a law portfolio. So he asked me, kisko dena hai Bharat Ratna agle saal? So I said, let me see the list. And I was surprised to find that neither Ambedkar's name was there, nor Sardar Patel's name was there. Sardar Patel, the man who welded 600 kingdoms into one India. Otherwise it would have been a moth eaten India. You know what the British did? They created Pakistan, they created India, and they made all the Rajas independent governments, independent countries. Sardar Patel sat each one of them, followed the principle of Samadama Veda Dand, and made not 600 but 500 of those to merge with India, and that's how we today have everything. Only one he could not carry through. He although got the king to sign, but then Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru took over, that is Kashmir, and that headache is still there. But I'm positive, given the grit of Mr. Narendra Modi, by 2019 we will have solved the Kashmir problem, with all of it is fine. India is the one country which has not broken up. Pakistan broke into 2, may break into 4 also, of what is remaining of Pakistan. Soviet Union broke into 16, Yugoslavia broke into 4, Indonesia broke into 2. The only country which was predicted to break into 20 never broke, because we are one people. And now our modern science of DNA, which is now published as research in the international journals, in the Journal of Genetics, for example in University of Cambridge, University of Mysore, University of Houston, says that we all have the same DNA. That's what I told OIC today in that program, that you accept that your ancestors and my ancestors are the same, then we are one family, then we can settle everything as a family dispute. But if you say you came from some Gori and Ghaznis family, then of course there will be a problem. Now he was cornered and he said, well, he couldn't say very much. But this is the whole thing. The DNA of every Indian from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, from Jamnagar to Guwahati is the same. And this is now demonstrated in the, yes, there may be differences in color and so on because of this, the geographic thing. If you are very close to the equator, you are bound to have darker skin than those who are in Kashmir. But that's got nothing to do with race. Race is DNA. And Indians are one race. And the British brainwashed you to think that we are two communities, Aryans and Dravidians, which is utter nonsense. And that's why we have to rewrite the history books. So here is this country with maybe 450 young people below the age of 30 coming through universities. If we can motivate them to do innovations and take risk and create new assets, India will be once again not only a developed country, but it will challenge the United States, which main motivating force in America is the innovation. We can challenge them in that. So I think we have a very, very bright future if we apply our minds to it. Of course, we need Ashirwad of Munis like Yogesh Ji, and all the sadhu sannyasis are people whom we respect. When I was a student at Harvard, when I first went to get my PhD, in the first class, there was an American sitting next to me. He asked me, I want to ask you a question. I said, what is it? He said, why did you people follow Mahatma Gandhi? I had taken aback by that question. I said, why not? He said, the man does not dress properly. He just wanted to, he said, he walking around in his underwear. How can you follow a man like that? So I said, you mean in America, you will have to be very well dressed? He says, of course. You must have a very fine tie, beautifully white shirt, lovely coat, shining shoes. Otherwise, they'll never look upon him as a leader. Which is a fact, you can see their leaders. But in our country, Mahatma Gandhi in his Langoti went around the whole country and people followed him because, as Muniji said just now in his speech, we have always believed that the human development is a harmonization of spiritual advancement and material prosperity, not only material prosperity. And if your mind gets focused only on material prosperity, then greed will come. And when greed comes, there will be corruption. And therefore a society, if it is to be a stable, clean society, it must never forget its spiritual roots. And that is why we have always divided labor. Those who were spiritual leaders had nothing with them. They had no house, they had no property, they had nothing. But the king had to come and prostrate before that and seek his permission for policies. That's the division of power. We were never against wealth accumulation. But if you got respect in society only if your wealth above your need is donated to the society in philanthropy, then we respect it like this. So these are the special strengths why India today is the only surviving civilization. UNESCO has tabulated all civilizations that have come since the dawn of history. They have found 46, 45 have disappeared. Whether it's the Egyptian civilization, Roman civilization, Greek civilization, Mesopotamian civilization. Even the Chinese, after the Ming, the Qing came. India is the only country in the world where the civilization is a continuing civilization, and that's its strength because we divided the power of the state, the power of before the people, and decentralized it. Nobody had, Rishi Brigu had identified knowledge, weapons, wealth, and land as these four sources of power. And if you look at our system, we divided that, nobody had more than one. Now, of course, that system is degenerated and we cannot repair it. But the fact is that originally our society was stable because nobody had a concentration of power in his hands. And nobody who had power had wealth, nobody had wealth had power. That kind of decentralization. So this great ancient civilization, in the next 20 years, can easily become the leading light of the world and be a dominant partner with the other democratic countries and other culturally akin countries. The whole of Southeast Asia, including China, are culturally akin to us. And therefore, we can form a grand cooperation and see that the whole world becomes a better place to live. Thank you very much.